The submit button will upload your responses to us. So we hope that all the technology is working correctly, but just in case it is not, if you haven't received a confirmation from us after a couple of days, it's important that you've saved that file and then you can send it to us via email instead. So the deadline is coming up pretty quickly here. It is a week from tomorrow, October 31st. So we hope that we will hear from you fairly soon. But right now I'm going to switch screens here, and we are going to pull up the application so we can take a look. All right. So this is the actual PDF sample that you can fill in and submit. You see I've scrolled down to the very last page, and there's a submit button in this section here. If we go back to the top, you can see that there's basic information about your organization, and this is in part information that's important to us, and also in part information that is important to the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation. We need to report on the winners and the various categories they fall into, which is why, for example, industry information is important and asked for, as well as who's the executive director and things like that. If the executive director is the person that is completing the form, or the head of the organization, then we ask also that you make sure to complete the phone number here, because it is not requested above. But otherwise, if it's someone other than the executive director completing it, you would make sure to put all your details there as the person that we would contact with questions. Okay. As I said, we need some information about the organization. Some of this is just for record keeping, but in terms of this being classified as a small business, that is a requirement, and the way that the WEDC has defined that for us is fewer than 500 employees here. So we hope that is a category that you can fit into. Additionally, we have some information here about board members, the number of staff members, and then there's a question about alumni. This is not important for selection. It's really important for us as a university office. We always like to know where we have alumni based, and so we'd love to know if you have some badgers at your organization, either that we can connect the student to for mentoring purposes, or just so that we have an idea of where the badgers have graduated and gone on to. Then there's a brief description of your organization as well as your mission statement. And finally, this piece, we want to know what your current international engagement and export strategy are. This is important to the WEDC's goals because we hope that hosting an intern will help you actually expand in these areas. We'd like to know your recruiting history here at the UW. So while we ask for new internships, that doesn't mean it's new internships for us in IIP. That doesn't mean it's your first and only internship or that you don't work with other offices on campus. But it would be great for us to know who those other units are, and if you've had prior engagement, recruiting history, whether it's for internships or for postgraduate employment. We are a big campus, and there's a lot of people engaged in activities regarding career services and helping students with their next steps. So we just want to make sure that we are all talking to the right people and on the same page. So please include that information. And if you haven't recruited here before, this is a great opportunity to get your foot in the door for recruiting at UW-Madison outside of we have big career fairs and things like that, but this is a first step and a much more targeted way to actually get your company name and logo out there, especially for small companies around the state. The proposal funding request part is really the bulk of the information that we'll be focusing on here. We need to understand your goals for the intern and the internship and how it's going to help you engage more internationally. And then, of course, there's the budget piece. I mentioned that there was a packet of information with guidelines. One of those is a finance and budget tips sheet. So when filling out this section, it's important that you take a look at that PDF. It has some examples of how this section can be completed. So we do expect that any internships funded through this program will be paid internships, and therefore the wages or salary aspect should be completed. There are other costs, however, that you could cover for an intern, which could be included as well, but they're not mandatory. So there could be travel costs, whether the student is coming to Rhinelander or going to Bonn, Germany. Your company might be covering travel. Similarly, housing. This is especially important for an overseas opportunity to have a good safe and conveniently located housing. That is difficult for us to know from here. We can work with you, but if it's something that your local office would be able to provide, that should be noted here. Similarly, if there is an office canteen and meals are regularly provided, this happens more frequently outside the U.S. perhaps than here domestically, but in some cases there is a lunch plan or something, and that can be included. And finally, tuition. I mentioned that there are courses, the WIP program or other internship classes, and so you could include an amount there for a tuition stipend. It's hard to say exactly what that would be because it is dependent upon the student's residency status and the number of credits in the course they're taking. So if this is an area that you will be including some funding for, we suggest that you perhaps choose a flat amount that would be for a student regardless of whether they're from Chicago or from Wisconsin, and whether or not they're taking 3 credits or 1 credit, something like that. Finally, if there are other expenses that are particular to your opportunity, maybe there is a uniform or safety equipment or something like that, you could certainly include that, and then you can note that down below. There's a section here for describing other expenses, and so you could include that text there. So those are the total expected expenditures on behalf of the student. And that amount is the key thing that we're focusing on, and really what the funds from the WEDC seed grants should go towards. We're also, however, allowing you to include in your calculation of total cost for the internship in-kind costs. So we recognize that there is time for the supervisor to review applications or the HR contact for your time today reviewing this webinar. So those can be included and should also be described below in the other section in terms of how you reach those calculations. But they should not exceed the amount that's actually calculated on behalf of direct payments for the intern. Those combined expenditures, outlay for the intern as well as the in-kind contributions should be totaled here, and then the amount that you are requesting. It should not exceed 50% of the total or a maximum of $4,000. And ideally, we'd have you calculate the percent of the budget there so we know and can easily look at that. But if that's a question that you have, please do contact us. All right. Then we're going to move on. Oh, excuse me. Let me get rid of those drawings. And finally, as I said, here's the section on the goals that match the WEDC goals. And our goals here of post-graduation employment with your company. If this is something that is an option, if you could describe that process, we'd appreciate it. So we know, does that mean a student would get an offer at the end of the experience? Would they need to reapply at a job fair later in the fall following the opportunity? Would there be some other process? If you could document that, that would be helpful for us when advising students. And finally, we would like to know, or the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation would like to know, if you've received any prior financial assistance from them, just so we have a clear understanding of funding previously.